I've done a lot of videos on my channel. The one I'm probably the most impressed by with the fan feedback I've gotten has to be the video I did last November entitled, "I dodged a massive bullet last year, but I didn't realize it until now." And I talk for almost 20 minutes about my experience interviewing with Bungie for a new role that they were offering. Now, this role came after the acquisition of Bungie from Sony. So Sony buys them out, injects $3.1 billion into the company. A lot of that was to be put into these like transition roles for people to help integrate Sony's pipeline with Bungie's pipeline. And after a really, really painstaking month-plus interview process, I ended up not pursuing it. And I don't regret any of that. And I love where I'm at now, and I love what I'm doing. And this makes me sad to see this news come out today. I'll show you the Cliff Notes version first. This comes from Jason Schreier. Bungie is laying off 220 people. They're moving some people to Sony proper. I'll talk about that in a moment. They are going to do 75, and then he does later correct himself to say 40 people are moving to a new studio. The quote, "We were overly ambitious, and our financial safety margins were subsequently exceeded, and we began running in the red." Now, they have a really, really long blog post here. I'm not going to go through all of it. It's called "The New Path for Bungie," written by Pete Parsons, talking about how they're laying off a ton of people, which is approximately 17% of their workforce. Now, this is sad news for everybody involved. I have been laid off twice in my life. Once was exactly 1 year to the day before I got the job that I so greatly appreciated at the time. Being laid off sucks. It's hard for you. It's hard for your family. It is an unexpected, violent change that you have to deal with instantly. It's not something that you can wish to get better. It's not something you can will to go away. And in most instances, it's largely preventable. So when Bungie and I were going back and forth on negotiating for a salary and a position description, I talked about my video back then, how wishy-washy they seemed and how confused they were on their own process. Some of the exams they gave me, their proprietary exams that they gave me, weren't very clear in the rule sets. And when I pointed that out after the fact during a debrief, because they did request one, I was told that they probably could be better, but they didn't know. Now, keep in mind, this is how they vet new people. So if you're going to vet somebody new with a process that you don't fully understand, then maybe the problem is you and the process and nothing to do with the people you select. Either way, that was a long time ago. And like I said, I'm in a much better mental place now, and I am significantly happier with the people I am currently working with. So for me, I got a good end to my story. Unfortunately, 220 other people, probably one of which was me in an alternate universe, just got shit canned, and boy, does that suck. So it says these actions will affect every level of our company, including most of our executive and senior leader roles. I want to point out that during my interview, I was told I would be a senior leader. I would sit on this advisory panel, basically to the right of engineering as kind of the lord of doctrine. That's what they told me. It ultimately morphed into some sort of weird training and HR thing. Again, Bungie was very unclear on what this whole position was. By the way, I will post a link to that original video I did in the description below. It might be worth going back and revisiting if you're curious about what I said, because there's a lot to take in, and I do deep dive into some of the engineering stuff behind it. But needless to say, this was expected. When Sony buys out a company, they are not buying you out because they like you. They are buying you out because they have something, you have something that they want. Now, they're not going to do a violent takeover and completely obliterate your company and, delete the team. Well, Microsoft did that. Maybe that's not a great example, but traditionally, you don't want to rock the boat too fast, but you're going to start pushing immediately, which was why that role that Bungie created was probably in direct response to Sony telling them, hey, clean up your policies and your procedures to match our own. We don't want to pay for redundancy. It could have also been Sony mandating to Bungie, you will hire this role. So in either sense of kind of how that position came to be, the one I interviewed for, it was not something that Bungie just dreamt up. It was clearly something that was put upon them, and they chose to respond to that requirement by creating the position that I interviewed for. So the fact that they're getting rid of all of these executive and senior leader roles means that Sony doesn't need redundancy, and they're just in full takeover mode now. There's no need to have your little empire with your little management structure. You're just going to use Sony's, and the org chart that Sony has, they're just going to add a new column down the side, and it's going to have a new Sony employee on top, and everything below that is going to be all the Bungie people that just funnel in. And that's exactly how this goes. There's probably some transition period. I know that Sony had originally said when this whole process was beginning that they were most likely going to do their best to not muddy the waters, and they were going to let Bungie interact and operate independently of kind of Sony ownership. That didn't happen. I am not saying it is a direct result of Concord specifically, although hastier decisions have been made. But we know that Bungie has been very involved since their Sony-isms, or becoming Sonified, whatever you want to call that. They were largely responsible for the death of the Last of Us multiplayer experience factions, and they were heavily involved in Concord, working on some of the gameplay balance and mechanics that appeared in that game. Fan reaction to the Last of Us factions being deleted was definitely less than favorable. Bungie's DLCs and all their expansions for Destiny 2 largely fell flat, but there was a redemptive arc during the final shape, which sales surged and seemed like they kind of won over a lot of the fan base then. Concord, even though I enjoyed it, has largely been a disappointment to many. It is not getting nearly enough attention or praise or recognition or pre-orders. I don't see that game lasting, especially after getting a bigger deep dive into the Steam numbers, which are always open and transparent, and how low that was. So if you look at kind of Bungie's portfolio post-Sony, not a lot of goodwill. So I could absolutely see Sony management saying, you know what, this whole idea of you guys being off on your own, that's not working anymore. We're going to take action. And that's exactly what they did. Now, Bungie is trying to obviously save face. They talk again about the importance of the final shape and all the positivity that that game has brought them. However, they are beginning to, we are committing to 2 other major changes today that we will believe that will support our focus, leverage Sony's strengths, and create new opportunities for Bungie talent. Now, I'm going to read these to you. Listen to how they sound, and let's talk about them in a moment. First, we are deepening our integration with SIE, working to integrate 155 of our roles, which is approximately 12% of their workforce, into SIE over the next few quarters. SIE has worked tirelessly with us to identify roles for many of our people as possible, enabling us together to save a great deal of talent that would have otherwise been affected by the Rift. Second, we are working with PlayStation Studios leadership to spin out one of our incubation projects, an action game set in a brand new science fantasy universe, to form a new studio within PlayStation Studios to continue its promising development. All right. So out of these 2 bullets, the second one is clearly a, hey, but wait, there's more. Don't worry. We just laid off a bunch of people. We're sorry. Oh, boo-hoo. But hey, we got a new game coming out. How exciting. New game. Oh my God, we're going to make a new studio. Exciting. Press release. What's it going to be about? Trailers, leaks, spoilers. Cool. That line is just, that whole thing is a throwaway. Of course you guys are working on new games. That's stupid. What a stupid thing to say. Whoever wrote this article, you should be ashamed of yourself. It's really, really stupidly written. However, the first one is the one that I want to focus on. And what did they say? We are deepening our integration with SIE. No shit. And that's definitely a mandate, by the way. That is not them saying, hey, we're going to try to figure this out. They're like, yeah. Sony probably sat around and said, this experiment failed. I could see this. I'm in the boardroom. I see it. Sony president looks over to his guy, run the numbers. The guy runs the numbers. We're paying for duplicate. What do we have for it? Sir, we've got Fallout Factions. Sir, we've got Concord. Sir, we've got... I think Bungie released that trailer for that other game too. That remake of that older game. I remember what it was. Some arena game. Again, fell flat. No one cares. It's not even out yet, right? And then the final shape was good. Okay, so... we'll say like 1 for 3, maybe like 1.5 to 2.5 wins the losses. So the president's sitting there and he looks to his guy and he goes, hey, what's going on? And they're like, we got redundancy. He's like, riff them all, reduction in force. Start crossing them off across the line. We find dupes, they're done. We are integrating with you guys. We are taking over whatever that Bungie core magic that we were so coveted in buying, that experience, that technology, that creative force that makes these games. We don't like the way you're steering the ship. It's our ship now, and we're steering it. And oh, by the way, you don't have a ship anymore. You're going to be on my ship, and I'm going to steer it, and you're going to help. That's what that means. And it's sad because from a purist video game enthusiast standpoint, this really does mark the end, the true end, in their own words now, not of us hypothesizing or thinking about what the intent of the original acquisition could have been. But now in their own words, they are saying that they are basically giving up to Sony. Like Sony is completely taking over. This will be a tremendous change for our studio. Of course it is. Of course it is. You just lost. You worked out the sweetheart deal with the upper execs. You spun this story of, hey, we're going to have Sony's backing, but we're going to be independent and on our own. But don't worry, we're going to keep the two separate. This is all being deleted right before your very eyes. They talk about the rapid expansion, which I was going to be a part of, by the way. The sharp downturn in the games industry, which, the market sucks right now. And our quality miss with Lightfall. Quality miss. Like the worst expansion rated ever. The need to give... Marathon, that's the game. The game I was talking about before, Marathon. The need to give both Final Shape and Marathon the time to ensure players. We were overly ambitious, and we began running in the red. Here's what happens in a takeover, in case you're not familiar with how this works. You have two businessmen sit in a room, or like leagues of attorneys sitting in a room across from each other. One guy wants to buy the other guy. Now, the guy that's about to be bought out, right, when Bungie management is sitting there across the table from Sony, they have dollar signs in their eyes. All the executives are about to get their golden parachute. The question is, how big is the parachute? Of course you're going to hype up your product. We have the greatest game ever coming out soon. Destiny 2 Lightfall is the best DLC we have ever released. We are going to help you clean up your game factions, your Last of Us factions game, because we have industry experience in that. Marathon's going to be a home run. We'll help you do whatever you want. We are the best. Pay us money. And that's exactly, these overhypes and overpromises sound great on paper. And guess what happens? They're not so great, are they? You need another example? Go back and look at what Microsoft did to Activision. Look when Microsoft bought Activision out, and look at how many layoffs and studios shut down to try to absorb that bill because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be. That's this on a smaller scale, but that's this. As a result, today we have to say goodbye to incredible talent, colleagues, and friends. Yeah, that's true, and that's unfortunate because the core of the company, the soul of the company, the guys that made the OG Halo 3 trilogy are long gone anyway. But whatever embers of that culture existed is now gone. This will be a challenging time because we're going to navigate these in the weeks and months ahead. It's going to be a hard week. Today and over the next several weeks, we're going to host town halls and meetings with breakout sessions and individual sessions to keep our communication open and transparent. Well, that doesn't matter. You failed. There's nothing left to say. We don't have to kick you while you're down. You don't have to kick the employees who got laid off while they're down. The goodwill and faith that Sony gave you has now been completely tarnished and completely removed for all time. They have completely deleted your management chain. They have completely assimilated whatever the original terms of that original purchase were are gone. They're gone as of today. I guarantee you, you're not going to see, maybe it'll leak. Maybe Jason SCHREIER will leak it for us in a couple months and we could dig into that together. This is a complete deletion of everything we know of that original agreement. And it's sad because this could have been a cool collaboration, but they couldn't deliver. It comes down to it, plain and simple. They couldn't deliver. So the new path for Bungie is basically Sony's direction, and Sony has now done it. I saw this happening partially. I'm not going to sit here and say I'm Nostradamus. I am not. More like Nostradamus, right? I'm not going to sit here and tell you guys I saw this coming and I predicted this moment. I did not. But it was very clear to me, and why I'm kind of promoting back to my original video that I did here. The reason why this was so hit me so hard, this news story, when I originally posted this and my experience with the interview, is I saw disruption. I didn't understand it to this level yet, but I saw disruption. It didn't seem right with me. I've been in business a very long time. I've seen a lot of things. I've negotiated contracts. I've been a contractor. I've been on the other side of the table writing the contracts. I've been on winning teams and losing teams. I've been laid off. I've gotten great bonuses. I've gotten horrible. I've seen it all, right? So just in the experience of like my career, when I did that interview with them, I knew the organization had problems. I don't remember exactly what I said in that video, but I'm going to bet you I said something to the effect of they're sick or they have a culture problem. Probably one of those two. And I don't mean sick like mentally sick, like perverted. I meant sick like the internal organization is not healthy sick. Either way, it's sad. And I do feel bad. And I'm sympathetic to those who are, going to get hit pretty hard. But knowing everything that I know, and understanding everything that I understand and seeing how things have evolved, this is not a surprise to me. I'll be curious to see as companies continue to expand and potentially discuss buyouts, whether Nintendo picks up the next big independent studio or Microsoft continues their quest on global domination of buying out every studio under the sun, or Sony makes a crazy bid for the arguably one of the pioneers of like pretty much every first-person shooter on a console ever. I'll be curious to see as those transitions begin to occur if this continues. And I can't imagine it's not. I can imagine going back to that day, being a Bungie employee, hearing Sony's buying us out, and the sales pitch that Bungie management gave about, hey, don't worry, you're going to make a ton of money from us, and there's going to be that Sony sprinkle on top. And of course, management's sitting in the back, rubbing their hands together. They know where this is all going. They're cooking the books, or at least they're fabricating because they're trying to get that number up. Maybe the original bid was like $2 billion and they got it to $3.1 billion. Either way, they end up getting that big chunk of change. All the employees love it. But secretly behind the scenes, things start falling apart and the cracks begin to form. The games come out. The sales for the games dictate everything. No one's going to remember that flashy sales pitch or that fancy E3 reveal. People are going to look at the numbers. And when the numbers are down, so is the company and so is the workforce. That's unfortunate. I wanted to talk about that. I hope this kind of made sense. I was trying to inject some emotion into it, but also some logical thought It is a tricky subject to navigate, and the reality is none of us, myself included, will probably ever know what happened behind those closed-door meetings. But it's very clear to me that Bungie couldn't get it done, and Sony's dropping the hammer finally. And that's exactly what they did. It's a somber place to be in. The video game industry continues to be a very, very volatile market, which is unfortunate. It means that future talent who is potentially interested in going into the video game industry probably won't, because it's a volatile market. And while there is great risk and reward, looking at games like Valheim, which had like 5 guys and sold millions and millions and millions of dollars in sales, or other studios that weren't so fortunate, I'll talk about those probably next week. It's a volatile market, and it remains to be unfortunate. So we'll see if they can turn this around. You always want to root for people, but today it's hard to root for anyone in this. I think if I was in Sony's shoes, I would have done the same thing. And I think if I was in Bungie's shoes prior to the acquisition of Sony, I probably would have done the same thing too. But at the end of the day, if your games aren't good, people are going to get impacted. And that's exactly what happened here. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching today's video. I appreciate it. That's it. Take care of yourselves. And until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.